Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Revenant Podcast, Episode 1. I am Gabe Erickson. I'm the CEO of Warrior Transition Outdoors. It's a veterans organization. We help veterans and their families holistically transition to civilian life through lifelong advocacy and outdoor adventures. And so running is a big part of our culture and our hearts. So this podcast is in tandem with Revenant event, which is an ultra marathon and a cycling ride. It's a gravel event. So we have a 30-mile ultra marathon, a 40-mile cycle on gravel. It's mixed terrain, and a 100-mile cycle, and also a virtual event. So if you can't make it to Billings, Montana on August 12th of 2023, make sure you're marking your calendar in general for our announcement in 2024 when that's taking place. But you can also join us virtually anytime between July 12th and August 12th, end of the race day, and you can be a Revenant virtual finisher with us to be a part of the family, part of the community. So today we have a very special guest. Jason Cheramie is our running platoon leader. He's a veteran himself. He's got an amazing story, an amazing family, and he's been running since he was just a little kid. With some ebbs and flows as to how much he's loved it. So let's get it going here with the Revenant Podcast. Thanks for joining us. How appropriate to be recording this on Memorial Day in a strange way. I don't know why, but it feels appropriate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But so just want to thank our first guest, Jason Cheramie.
Yes. Spot on. Got it.
To the podcast. Thanks, man, for being our kind of guinea pig for this thing, and tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gabe. Thanks for having me too. I appreciate the opportunity. So for me, started off kind of in a small rural town. Didn't have a lot of sports opportunities just because it was a smaller school. It was either basketball or track, and for me, not very coordinated. So I left track as my only option. Luckily, I had some running ability, right? And from an early age, middle school on up, I've just always run, right? And I really have fallen in love more with the sport. I think the older I get and the different events I've been doing, and then in my military career, I think it just was a perfect fit too, because that's just part of that business model of the military, right? Staying in shape physically and mentally, right? And as I kind of was talking earlier, I think the reason I think I fall in love with the sport more now is because of that mental health aspect for me personally. I find it really helps me to cope with a lot of things in a positive way, because in my earlier career and years, I would have negative coping mechanisms, right? I would be drinking or whatever, and it wasn't really healthy, right? You at the time you think, hey, this is the way to solve it, right? And then I think getting back into running probably into my late 30s, early 40s, really. I mean, I'd always run, but not as much, right?
Yeah.
And that was a really critical part of my life, I think, after some deployments and stuff. And I thought, wow, this is really cool, and fell in love like I did back in high school, So that to me is what running is to me, and that's what it means to me. And I think, hopefully, I think that resonates with a lot of other people, like we mentioned, just having that connection in some way and having a community, I think, that sort of understands that. And I always say, like, the trail running community and the road runners, it's kind of my people, right? There's always that common connection that you can meet a new group. For instance, this weekend I met a new trail running group, but it was an instant connection because we all kind of have the same things in common. Why we run, especially trail running, can be a little bit different for folks. So it was a great connection, and I think for me, running has done a lot for me. And not to be too dramatic with it, but really, I think it's in a way helped me stay centered and focused and kept me from those darker moments, right? And so for me, that's my story. That's what running is to me and how I've come to where I am now.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I want this to be very conversational, so I might throw in a story now and then. I ran track back in 8th grade, and I didn't run track. Let me do that. I was a thrower, but they made me run because I was I was a fat, but they made me run. And I was always in the last heat with all the kids that were like slow. I'm talking slow. And they made me run the 100-meter dash. So I just was like traumatized by running as a kid. You know, it was not fun for me. Even still, like, I think we talked about ahead of this podcast that I am not a runner, but I'm a journalist by trade and in my heart. So I think that's why I'm here. But that's really cool. So thanks for sharing all that. Tell everyone a little bit about your military experience, if you would, and as raw and vulnerable as you want to be with that. Yeah, I know your heart. I know, we have a little bit of a background. So, but yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So after high school, I tried college, and I wasn't quite disciplined enough for college, which was fine. So then I talking to my brother. He was in the Army at the time, and he's like, "Man, you need to sort your life out. You need to join the military and figure it out." So 3 days later, I went to a recruiter's office and joined the Air Force. And it was the best advice, real advice, right? Just that kind of tough love that you need sometimes, right? Didn't want to hear it, didn't like it, but man, was he right? And I knew he was at the time. So joined the Air Force, kind of went in, whatever jobs you had, I said, listen, I need to just ship as early as I can, and ended up with a pretty cool job. First off, as a enlisted aircrew member on C-130 and C-141 cargo aircraft. So traveling all over, right? I mean, 20 years old, and I'm in some of the coolest places, doing some of the coolest stuff, and it was an awesome first tour. But then after the 4 years, I kind of said, you know what, I don't need this military thing. I've got this thing figured out, right? And I had a plan. Well, after a year or two of being a civilian, I figured, nah, man, the plan started working me, right? And I was, oh man, I need the military, right? I really miss that structure, and that's what I need for me personally. It just didn't operate well as a civilian. I just wasn't disciplined enough to do that, right? And so I started looking at getting back in, and then 9/11 happened, right? And I was like, all right, I'm getting back in. At the time, my wife and I were brand new married, and she's like, "Well, pump the brakes, hold on." So we had some conversations, and I joined back up, and she's been an amazing military support wife, 4 kids through the 22 years. She's amazing. She's definitely the hero of the family. People will say, you'll go by and people say, "Oh, thank you for your service," and I'm like, yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that for me and all the other men and women. But I said, you need to call my wife and thank her, because she's the hero, right?
Yeah.
I got to go to work and do what I love to do every day. It was never a job, right? It never felt like a job. So that was awesome. And I think that I think that's tough, because you go through that. I think a lot of people's common thread. You kind of go through that where you're trying to figure yourself out. And I think retirement was a hard decision. But I think it was the right decision. As we look back now, family-wise, as we look back, we're like, yeah, that was the right decision, and we're in the right spot. What an honor and a privilege it was to serve. I feel blessed to have the career I had. Mostly my career was kind of IT kind of related.
Yeah.
Did some amazing tours and really sporting deployments with that. And then my last 4.5, almost 5 years, was as a first sergeant. And that was the best job, absolutely. An amazing experience to really be able to help people and take my experiences, and I think help folks in amazing, different, deep ways, and forever have those connections with those people. So yeah, that's my career, and that's the highs and some of the lows, but great career overall, and how blessed and amazing I feel to have the wife and the sport I did.
Yeah. Some of the viewers, whether you're watching this 5 years from now or the day I post it, some people might be wondering, like, why are we talking about the military, which is a relevant question, right?
Sure.
On a Revenant running, cycling, like, active podcast. But the reason is because, as you can see, my hat, Warrior Transition Outdoors, is an organization supporting and putting on that event. That event benefits veterans and their families. And so you mentioned your spouse, your kids, You know, your kids are just as much heroes as your wife, right? Like
Absolutely.
they endured so much that civilian children don't endure. Yeah, I'll just tell you as a civilian man, you you know the way you describe your heart for service, that does make you heroic from a civilian perspective, because you just took that on with so much joy, you know. So I just want to say that, yes, you're why I totally understand what you're saying, but yeah, that's awesome, man. So when back to like running and stuff, what are some of the events? What are some of the things you like? Do you remember your first like big run? Was it a half marathon? Was it a
Yeah.
marathon? Like, tell me about the decision to sign up. What was it? What made you sign up? Were you prepared?
Oh
Like,
God.
tell me all the things.
Yeah, so my first event. So here we have this local race. It's called Contraband Days. I think now they call it Pirate Fest, maybe, just because of where we are in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Jean Lafitte and the mystique of the pirates coming in, stashing their loot around here, and it was a big, just southern Louisiana, New Orleans is close by. This is just kind of one of the areas they ran in, the Outlaws and Pirates, right before this was a state, right? It was Outlaws and Pirates.
Yep.
And so they celebrate that with the festival. Well, part of the festival is they have a run. They have a 3 mile and a 5 mile. And I was in 7th grade, and I had run in my 6th grade track, and it was pretty cool. It was fun. Really was like, all right, this is fun, because I did long distance, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Now, where we lived was out in the country, so I could just go run, and there was no traffic, no nothing. It was just running, right? So I just told my mom and dad, I said, hey, I want to do this race. And they're like, 5 miles? Like, you've never run more than one. I'm like, yeah, but hey, whatever, right? So totally not prepared, right? I hadn't done any training for it. And I had on some like tennis shoes that like you play tennis in. I remember these old like K-Swiss shoes, right? The heavy, clunky shoes, right?
Yeah.
And I placed like in the top 5 with the adults, right? And so, right, so I'm coming in and I finish, and I'm like, okay, cool, that was fun. I didn't realize how well I had done, right, for that age and that whatever. And they were like, man, you should like really take track serious, and I think that's the first part, like, yeah, maybe this is something I can do, because I enjoyed it, and yeah, that was my first actual race experience. It was just, I think that, I think my life is kind of like, and I say this not to try to be too religious or spiritual here, but I feel like God has always had his hand over me, right? Whatever I've done or decision, he's always guided me. And I think that was one of those moments where, as I look back, it was something where it was kind of shifted me in the right direction, right? To say, hey, man, this is something you need to do and stay focused on. So it's good.
I love that, man. And this is a place for people just to share. So whether it's about spirituality or any aspect of like running is just everything to everyone, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it can be anything to anyone. And
Yep.
so, that's really special. And I love that it was like a calling. It wasn't just this willy-nilly, oh, this thing's going on, da da da. It really felt like, but there's probably something deep inside you that said, like, I need to do this run and I don't know why.
Yeah, right. And so I'll age myself here. That was before internet, so it was just seeing a flyer, just seeing a flyer in some store we ran or something, and I just saw the advertisement, and I grabbed it, said, hey, and I filled it all out, and I gave it to my parents, said, hey, I need like $25 or whatever it was for this, and they're like, no.
Yeah.
But we did it anyway, so that was cool. Yeah, that was cool.
On that topic, I'm kind of curious, how do you process running? I know you started off telling us what running means to you, especially around mental health. I kind of think of life in like 4 buckets, and it's oversimplified, but like physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, right? Yeah. Running is obviously physical. You mentioned the mental component. I'm guessing it's emotional at times, and is it spiritual? Like, tell me about what that means to you, because that calling for someone like me, I have to feel called to go running. I have to feel like you need to go to get off my butt and do that. But what is your perspective on those?
Yeah, no, I think it is the 4 pillars, right? I think it is, and yeah, you can speak to the first 2, right? And I think the emotional, I think that's part of well, for me, it's more about I would say like challenging myself. Like, hey, when I ran that 5 miler, I was like, dang, I can run 5 miles and I could be pretty successful. What's next? And I knew nothing about the running world. I didn't know there were half marathons. I knew nothing about that, right? I just
Yeah.
knew on the track team there was a 1 mile and a 3 mile event. And so I just started learning about that. You're like, man, if I can do 5, I can do 10. If I can do 10, I can do, and you just go on and on and on until it gets crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you're doing the events and you're like, all right, I'm here, I signed up, what's the journey going to be like? Because there's going to be a little bit of a journey through this, right? Whatever distance I've run, it's always been a little bit of a journey. And some of the longer distances, you go through some emotion. I mean, those marathons and the ultras, the overnight stuff, or some of the crazy like 24-hour runs where you run as much as you can in 24 hours. You're going through a lot and you're questioning a lot, and I've never quite had the part where you kind of start seeing stuff and having these images, but I can see where that can be, right? You can get to some of those longer distances that have that. So I think that's where the spiritual and emotional part come into it. And a little bit of that is, that kind of spiritual, emotional kind of almost kind of intertwined a little bit, where like, for instance, I went for a trail run, yesterday, and it was a great run, but you kind of out there, you're in the outdoors, you're thinking, wow, how beautiful this is. And the person I was running with, she would stop and take pictures of a rabbit or the plants. And you're like, yeah, this is what it's about, right? You're having that experience with nature a little bit, right? To appreciate all that, where you don't sometimes get that on the road sometimes, unless you're in a scenic area. But if you're in the urban area, and maybe there's some of that in the urban area too, but I think that's where the spiritual and emotional part come into it for me.
Yeah, that's cool. And when I say spiritual, some people might be like, "Oh, angels and seeing all." No, just a fullness of soul. Like the. I had an epiphany the other day, and I want this to be kind of the DNA of how Revenant talks about fitness and this kind of journey. And I was up, same thing. I went for just a mile run. I'm preparing for my first ultra. The only thing I've ever done before that was a half marathon. I jumped from no 5Ks, no nothing, to a half marathon, and that was the Indy Mini back in the day. And so now we're preparing. I'm going to do this ultra marathon for the Revenant, and I'm at 1 mile, man. That's like the most I can do.
Awesome.
But it was a trail run, and it took us up overlooking the city of Billings, and it was just so beautiful. And I was just sitting there, and I heard that voice in your heart say that fitness is about feeling yourself, knowing yourself, and remembering who you are.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just gonna make that what this like ultimate message is kind of about for this podcast, not for you as a guest necessarily, right? But feeling yourself, like as you're running, you're feeling like normal maybe, but also like you're feeling like, hey, I'm noticing my weak points. I notice that, like you said, mile 3, my mind starts to falter. You start to really like feel and understand yourself. That's kind of the knowing yourself piece, and remembering who you are. Like I don't think we realize as humans how amazing we are, so that desire to go to the 10th mile, and then that, okay, now I can do 20, now I can do 30. There's something in there that says you can do way more than you ever knew, right?
Absolutely, man.
Discovering that about yourself. So I don't know if that resonates with you a little bit, but that's what I want us to talk about fitness in that way at the end of the day on this podcast. And that's kind of the stance I'm going to take now. Because like you said, this is what it's all about. It wasn't about getting jacked, and it wasn't about it was about those moments of connecting with what was around you. So
yeah, I'd never heard it put that way, but that's exactly right, man, for sure. And you think about what we are as humans, how we're built. We're made to move. We're made to travel, right? I mean, this is in our DNA, right? At any level.
Yeah.
And for sure, that is spot on. I love that. That's great, man.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Tell me, when did you first like what's been the biggest challenge in terms of, was it an overnight thing, or was it a 24-hour thing, or when you kind of reflect, and I'm sure there's probably several, but what comes to your mind right away as to, man, that was that was the biggest thing I overcame, in terms of events, or maybe it was just your own personal run. Maybe it wasn't an event. I don't know.
I would have to say probably one of the Air Force marathons I did. I try to get back to the Air Force marathon every year, just because it's just kind of a special thing, right? And I was at mile 22 and started having a severe cramping and these dehydration issues, right? And I'm like, oh no, I'm so close, right? So close. And so I just kind of sat there. Luckily, there was a tent, little area, got kind of rehydrated a little bit, got some little massage, kind of cramp, work everything out. Started walking again and started locking up again. I think I made it to maybe mile 24, before the race just said, yeah, man, you can't continue. You got to stop, right? We can't let you go anymore. And because I was just trying to walk it out. And they were like, nah, you're just really dehydrated. We're going to take you in. And that was that. I've never had a race like that except for a Ragnar event. Which a Ragnar event is just a 24-hour or 48-hour relay race with a team of 10, 12, 4, whatever. But that was a much shorter distance. There's only maybe a total of 15, 16 miles per person you do over 3 legs. This was the marathon. So that was really hard because I think the hardest part of that was because that race is so special to me, because it's a bit of a remembrance, right? For me too, right? Because there's folks out there that the last day of their life were wearing a uniform, right? And they'll never get to do an event like that, right? Never. And so I think for me, it's a little bit of, hey, I can do this race. I'm mildly healthy and in shape, right? I can do it because someone else can't. And when I didn't finish, that was hard because I didn't finish. I felt, and I have to give myself some grace on that. I get it, but I felt like not only did I not finish for me, I didn't finish for all the folks that I was kind of running for. So that was probably the most difficult, and it really had to think about that. I really had to go back and question: did I do everything to prepare? Was I in the and I did it, right? And as I look back, well, okay, that's a me thing, right? I need to, if I'm going to commit to something like that, and have the meaning behind it, then I need to back it up, right? And I need to take that more serious. So I think that was probably the hardest race event for me. And there's other races I didn't finish, I guess. That would be the toughest for sure.
I mean, you're such a humble guy, so I'm sure you looked inward and found all these things that you could have done better in preparation. But also, man, like, everything kind of happens for a reason. Like, what do you think you took from that loss? What was the W in the L, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, it was good self-reflection, right? It was a good self-reflection where I was, I think I was 44 or 45 at the time. Yeah, 45. Yep. And I just taken my health for granted, right? That I could just go run whatever, however. I didn't need to prep. I put on my shoes and I go. And then you start realizing, hey, man, there's a lot more to this, right? You need to commit some effort and intent, right? I had, maybe that's what I didn't lack, right? I lacked the intent behind it, behind my training, behind what I was doing. I was just going on natural. Luckily, I just was, like I said, I just had some natural health and ability to go run, and it's amazing. I'm thankful for it, very thankful. But I took it for granted. I took it for granted, that I could do that. And I think it goes back to sort of that spiritual part. And I'll back up a little bit and say, to me, I think there's a difference between spirituality and religious.
100%.
Right. I think those two are divergent. So the spiritual part was, you're gonna have your S together, right? You gotta have your stuff together, man. Don't just do this anymore because something bad could happen, right? And then I maybe would have the inability to run either at all or limited distance in events, and that would be tragic for me personally.
Yeah.
If someone told me today, sorry, man, for whatever reason, health-wise, you can't run no more. Sorry, you can't. That would be devastating for me.
Yeah.
Even even now, like, as slow as I run, right? It's almost a walk sometimes. Um, it's still it's meaningful, and there is something I get out of every run, no matter duration, location, whatever.
That's really powerful, and that's encouraging to me to have a plan, to be intentional about my own training for the Revenant event, right?
Yeah,
And not just go out like to really get into it and do it the right way. And I love how that what you said like took it from, oh, I could have trained harder, to like it took it to your heart, from this like, oh, I could have trained harder, to I didn't respect it enough.
yeah,
Like that's
absolutely.
powerful, man. And I think that's when talk about like knowing yourself and remembering who you are. If we're going back to that kind of understanding of things, like when I say we're these amazing beings, like that comes through like intentionality, and not just through willy-nilly. I get to like arrive, right? So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, a lot of respect, just for that reflection. Do you have any, kind of flipping the script, any races that you just like, man, that race was the defining race of my career, like just from a whether it was about pride for yourself, or maybe just a PR, I don't know.
I think, I don't know if I know probably there hasn't have been an event that I think has done that, but what I hope is that as I continue to increase my different races and distances, that there will be, because I think there's going to be a defining race in my future, and trying to figure that out is the challenge now for me, because I think I've kind of just been at the point where I've been running, I've been racing, and I've been challenging myself, but I've lacked a real challenge. I feel like I've always shied away from a real. I thought, man, this race would be really cool, or this distance would be really cool. And I think there's going to be that moment where I'm gonna have that moment, but I don't think there's been a race where I've had that moment, because I just feel like I've kind of plateaued a little bit
Mm,
in my running, and I feel like now, where I am now, retirement, and my job with Cisco, I can commit different to it than what I could before. So I think I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be awesome. I think next year's going to be a great year, and I think starting with the Revenant is going to be great, because that's going to be, for me, that's going to be my catalyst for my racing season next year.
yeah.
Start with that, and then build from there, and then that's really cool, because what a great start, right? What a
Hmm.
great start that's going to be, because it's not just an event, right? It's more than just a race, right? I mean, Revenant, WTO, that's what I feel I'm about, and the running, and the veteran community, and helping the families come together, and what WTO does. That's a great catalyst for me to jumpstart my race season for next year.
Yeah. I love that, man. We're already talking about Revenant 2024. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
man. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we started planning this pretty quick, a quick turnaround as far as
Oh yeah.
things like this should go. And I just know whoever is going to be there is who's meant to be there year one, and 2024 is going to be just next level, powerful, a powerful experience. So that's awesome. Thanks for. I didn't know you planned that. That's really cool.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Anything else? It's been an amazing conversation. Honestly, I love how you look at it through several dimensions, and not just this 1D approach to, I like to run because it keeps me in shape. You know what I mean? It's
Well, to be honest though, I think it's been a progression through the years, though, right? Like I said, I wasn't always in love with running, right? It's weird. It sounds weird, I know when you say it that way, but it's like a relationship, right? And the longer it goes, the more in love I get in with it, because it means so much more to me. Because in a way, and not to kind of go negative with this, but you feel like there's just a limited, finite amount of time that we're going to be able to do this.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, but yet I get so energized when I look at like the Boston Marathon, and it's a qualifying marathon, right? So you got to really have your stuff together to do this. But I see the age groups are 65, 70, 75 and above. and these men and women are crushing it at 75 years old, still qualifying. So I'm like, all right, I still got a lot of time left on the clock here to run. So that's what I think too. Like, you can't take it for granted, right? I can't just think I have this ability to run. I love running. It's great, but not everyone can, right? And not everyone does. And this is what I found, again, has really helped keep me center. And over the years, really have this deep appreciation for running and what it does for me, because I know there's been times where my wife's like, listen, man, you're being kind of a jerk. You need to go for a run. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's been a few days or a week or whatever, and I haven't run. So, it helps me manage that, Yeah. I think that's been a key to my marriage success too, I think, is managing all those emotions and all that stuff that we try to figure out because we've got work, we've got kids soccer practice or whatever, right? The whatever it is, whatever distraction from life that we have, right? That because life gets busy, you forget, and it takes kind of a back burner. But then you're like, okay, hold time out, right? I need to be more aware of that, and make that important for me, but not only me, but like you said, it's for my family, my kids, and my wife. I think that's what has helped us, and it's awesome because now my son and my youngest daughter like to run.
I was just going to ask if you're passing that down to them.
Yeah, so. And now I can't keep up, obviously. I can keep up my 9-year-old. but my son's too fast. So we play golf together. Yeah.
That's great, man. Thank you so much for, kicking this whole thing off. I really appreciate your story, and anything else you want the people to know about anything we've talked to. What's your kind of like last word that comes to your heart to share with everyone?
Yeah, I would, if you're listening to it and you're kind of liking what we're talking about and you're struggling in any way, I mean, there's a community out there for you, right? It could be WTO. It could be any of the various veterans organizations out there. But I would say reach out to WTO and have a conversation, right? I think that's where it starts. I think connection is the most important thing you can do. If you're listening to this and you're struggling in any way, or you just want to have a conversation about running too, right? I mean, there's a community for that too. I think this is definitely where we want to be as a community for veterans and helping those that are struggling in any way and need a connection and a community. I think you'll find a great community here at WTO. And I think that's probably what I was thinking and wanted to say.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you're our running platoon leader for Warrior Transition Outdoors, right? So
yeah.
If you are watching this, if you're a veteran, if you're a milspouse, if you're Gold Star family, you name it, like if you have any connection to the military at all, if you're the brother of a veteran, like I am, both of us are available for contact, and future guests will be people maybe who have never heard of WTO before until I reach out to them. But, I think that's a pretty awesome way to kick it off because you run this platoon of running, and I love your heart behind it. It's going to be a really big deal. It's going to be a lot. It's going to bring us so much togetherness and oneness. I'm really excited to see what happens. And I think Revenant is kind of like the thing that's going to kick that off, publicly speaking. So thanks again, man. It's awesome.